So with that, I think we're close to on time, just a couple minutes over. I'd like to turn now to our first panel of the day. So if those next panelists can all identify themselves, hopefully they have, and we've got them up on stage. So this panel is one that I'm really personally excited to hear more about, because ever since we began studying collaborative journalism in 2016, public media in the United States has clearly stood out. And that's because for 10 years, an entire decade, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has encouraged and funded collaborations among its members across the country. They have been leaders in the United States in this effort for a long, long time. So today we're going to hear more about a few of those collaborative efforts. And we're also going to take a reflective look over what they've learned over the last 10 years. Note that this panel will have an audience Q&A at the end. So as I mentioned before, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A box, not in the chat. So to get started, I would like to turn the floor over to a woman I greatly, greatly admire, my predecessor here at the Center for Cooperative Media, Judon Marshall, the Chief Content Officer at WFAE in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Judon, the floor is yours.
Good morning. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm the Chief Content Officer at WFAE. We're the NPR news station in Charlotte. I've only been in public media 3 years, so I'm also excited to be here today to learn from these folks who are either leading large collaborations across public media, or in one case, providing the support that helps make those collaborations possible. Joining me today are Donna Vestal, the Managing Director of America Amplified, Vanessa de la Torre, Executive Editor of the New England News Collaborative, Jeremy Bernfeld, Editor of Guns in America, and Kathy Merritt, Senior Vice President of Journalism and Radio at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So we're going to jump right into this. Donna, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your project.
Can you hear me now? Hi, I'm Donna Vestal. I'm the Managing Director of America Amplified, which is a collaboration of collaborations. And I'm really pleased to be here today. You want me to take it away now? All right, Jeremy, you can advance the slide. My journey to this amazing opportunity with America Amplified, which I'm sure very few of you have heard about because it's only all of 5 months old at this moment in time. So I'll explore a lot more about how I got to this, how public media has risen to the challenge with America Amplified in a little bit. But when I came to public media, it was about 10 years ago. I came from the newspaper world as a business editor at the local Kansas City Star here in Kansas City, where I'm at. And I was asked to take on the leadership of some kind of project around ag reporting in the Midwest. And I had no idea what I was getting into, but I thought at the time that it might be really interesting to be given the opportunity to learn, and I considered it like another graduate degree, to be honest. As I went into it, I had no idea what to expect. Jeremy, you can advance the slide. As you can see from this map, if you can see it all, this was the lay of the land for public media, the beginnings, the seedings of collaboration back in 2009, 2010 when I came in. My little piece of the pie was that Agribusiness Journalism Center that was not yet named. Eventually, within a quick turnaround, it became Harvest Public Media, which still exists today, I'm proud to say. But at the time, this was based on the Corporation for Public Broadcasting seeing a very, very important opportunity and responsibility to think about journalism in a new way. If you recall, this was really the beginning of the loss of many journalism, newspaper jobs in particular. And local news was being hit pretty hard. In retrospect, we were still in, they were probably in pretty good shape compared to where we are even today. But collaborations and other efforts have risen to this challenge. But for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and we'll have Kathy Merritt will talk about this in a little bit, what it was, why we started at this point and got to the place we are today. This was truly so exciting. The announcement was made at the museum, and I actually watched, I remember the video and read about the announcement, and I was just so inspired by the idea that by working together, we could solve some of these challenges. We could join our resources together. We could solve some of the challenges around particular beats and or subject matter that was not being able to be fully covered by traditional print media at the time. If you see there, Fronteras was an effort, was an immigration focused collaboration. There was a healthy healthcare collaboration. There was economic impact of changes in the economy actually in different parts of the country. So it was subject focused, but very much regional focused. And the idea was that CPB would invest in letting the local stations build something special. And I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of that experiment. At the time, some of the dots also refer to Project Argo, which was an online news initiative at the time. Jeremy, you can turn it over, Now, it's 10 years later now, and public media has just ramped up the collaborative fiber for 10 years, over and over and over again, just building on what we've learned from the subject matter reporting that I mentioned previously to partnering with print media, whether it's magazines, newspapers, television, certainly public television and radio working together to figure out how to employ the journalists in the wisest way possible. Tech advances, working on how we share content, has come a long way thanks to the work of collaboration. Multi-platform series, very, very important at the time, even 10 years ago, when we were trying to figure out how do we tell a story in the right platform and in different platforms for different audiences. Indeed, I would say collaboration through the years with public media has been an experiment in how we reach an audience and how we serve an audience best. Now, it's definitely moving up even into a higher level of bigger collaborations now in public media as we explore the idea of NPR hubs, which are a collaboration between NPR and regional areas of the country. There's a hub in Texas and a hub in California. And right now a Gulf State hub is coming into the fore, and indeed there'll be a big announcement next week about another hub. Yeah, next slide. This, what I'm doing now, as I mentioned, is a collaboration of collaborations. America Amplified has really focused on bringing community engagement, infused reporting, originally into election coverage, but now even expanding that so much into how we're dealing with COVID-19. And I'll be talking about that in another session later today. But this picture actually sums up a lot, because this was we're doing a national talk show, which is a collaboration of our team. The woman there is Andrea Tudhope, our coordinating producer, working with a station, KCUR in Kansas City, with two hosts. One was in San Francisco, another was in Atlanta. The head producer of this show was in Atlanta, and it was picked up by stations all over the country. So we were hearing from, with the support of those stations, getting the word out and working with us to figure out how best to do this. So it, in many ways, just was taking collaboration to the highest level. And indeed, America Amplified was built on is built on working with 7, 8, 9 collaborations across the country and trying to support them. And one of our most important elements of what we do, and we talk about it all the time, is we have to strengthen collaboration, the fiber that's out there and that has been put into motion by CPB. And with that, I would like to hand off to Kathy, but first I'd like to, if you don't mind, I would love to read something I found in a press release back from 2010, and it was talking about Kathy. And I just found it fascinating. It was a PS at the end of a press release, and it said, PS, congratulations to CPB's Kathy Merritt for her expert midwifery of the LJCs. That's local journalism centers that I was first referencing. The original RFP was issued on June 11th, 2009. Public broadcasting is a human animal. And alas, it took 9+ months gestation and hard labor to carry these multiples to term, not to mention lots and lots of questions like, quote, do you know what you're having? I wonder if she had any idea. It ends, so Kathy, kudos to you for pushing these LJCs out into the world. And remember, mothers are innately wired such that the joy of our new babies erases all memories of the painful birth so that we can do it all again. And Kathy has done it many times. So I'd love to hand off to Kathy to tell you a little more.
That is just too funny. I had not heard that at all. So, but if I'm the mother of the collaborations, then Donna Vestal is the godmother, definitely, or at least the guru of public media collaboration. So thank you, Donna, I really appreciate that. And really, I just want to take a minute to echo some of the things that Donna has talked about. And Jeremy, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. And talk a little bit about the scope of CPB's investment over all of these years. We've funded in the past decade 38 different journalism collaborations, and that has involved 125 public radio and television stations in 42 states, and you can see that it's totaled over $39 million in this past decade. And, as Donna said, this was back when we were just beginning to see the losses in the newspaper industry. And at CPB, we thought there are all these public radio and television stations across the country. How do we get them to achieve some kind of a scale working together, and not really to replace the losses of newspapers, but really just to increase the capacity of local journalism, adding reporters, adding editors, and as Donna said, making that push to digital platforms. And that's the opportunity that we saw back 10 years ago. And really it's come to fruition. It's been amazing to see. And Jeremy, if you go to the next slide, please. This map shows not all 38 collaborations that CPB has funded, but these are the ones that are still up and running today, whether they're funded by CPB or not. For example, the one that Donna really started and nurtured, Harvest, right kind of there in the middle of the map. CPB funding ended probably 5 or 6 years ago, Donna, you can correct me on that, but it continues and is just going strong. So we're really proud that a lot of these collaborations have continued long after the CPB funding got them up and running. And the big kind of ovals and circles that you see just represent the kind of coverage area of these particular collaborations. And I just want to call out a couple, and then I'll turn it back over to Donna. She mentioned the Texas collaboration, and that involves the stations in Houston, Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio, and they've created a statewide newscast network that serves 31 stations. It goes well beyond their 4 stations. They do state capital coverage. They have a daily program called the Texas Standard, and they've just done some outstanding work. And they have become now an NPR hub. NPR has put an editor in place so that all the great work that they're doing locally also gets to come up to the national level. The Alaska Energy Desk, I was talking with these folks yesterday. They were so proud. They've just won several regional Murrow awards. They won a national AP award. One of the stations, the one in Bethel, just received an almost $100,000 Facebook grant. None of that would have happened, I think, without the collaboration. These stations individually just wouldn't be doing the level of work and the kind of work that they can do together. For example, they created the podcast Midnight Oil that's had millions of downloads now and had 3 different seasons. And one last example, the Ohio Valley Resource that's in West Virginia, Kentucky, and part of southeastern Ohio. Award-winning work there that they've done on the resurgence of Black lung disease, the opioid crisis. They just put out a voter's guide in West Virginia because of the mail-in ballots that are happening there. They partnered with NPR, with Frontline, with ProPublica on covering some of the things that I mentioned. And they have a book coming out of their reporting. So just the level, the quality and quantity of reporting has been raised, I think, through these collaborations. And CPB continues to fund collaboration. The Gulf States Newsroom just is up and running in the past couple of months, and we'll continue to look at collaboration as a very powerful force multiplier for local and regional journalism. So Donna, back to you.
Next we'll actually move to Vanessa from the New England News Collaborative.
Oh, great. I was going to mention real quickly that we had a question about lessons learned from all this collaboration. And that's what the 3 of us are going to do next, to share a few of those lessons that we've learned.
Hey everyone. Oh, okay, great. I just also wanted to mention that obviously with the public media collaborations, a huge element is the tremendous in-depth journalism that's happening across our communities. But another benefit I would argue is that through a lot of these collaborations, public media has been able to bring in more diverse reporters and editors into the fold. So I came from a newspaper background like Donna. I worked at the Hartford Courant newspaper for about 11 years. And that's when Connecticut Public Radio brought me into their newsroom as part of another CPB funded public radio collaboration called Sharing America. So I was part of that collaborative for 2 years. And then this January, I became the executive editor of the New England News Collaborative. Slide. So the New England News Collaborative, 10 stations. If you take a look and you're aware of the sort of impact that these different stations have had, you know, it's a very powerful regional collaboration. We started out with 8 stations back in around 2016 when we got significant funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, expanded to 10 stations this year. And the lead station is Connecticut Public, so that's where I'm based in Hartford, Connecticut. And you know, again, the CPB funding is significant because it funds not just my position, which I'm really grateful to have right now, but a producer who helps put out a weekly magazine-style radio program called Next that we put out for free to the stations every week. And that funding also helps support a very talented photojournalist. And the way, a major way that our partner stations work together is by contributing stories that are really relevant to the entire New England region. So issues such as environment, clean energy, demographic changes, and more recently, obviously, the coronavirus pandemic. Next slide. So one of the main lessons I want to share with you today that I've learned in the past 5 months is building the muscle of collaboration. You know, if you're here for this conference, you're an ambitious person. We're all ambitious. We want to do the really impactful projects. We want to do the stories that make a difference in our communities. I just want to let you know that you don't have to do the biggest project to start right off the bat. You can build toward it, and no action is too small. You know, I really want to emphasize that. It could be, collaborating on one story. It could be just asking your partners to share one story. It could be working on a regional talk show special through, say, America Amplified. Those are the sorts of ways that your partner stations are working together. And what you're doing is you're making the collaborative part of the routine. And for many of you who work with very busy daily newsrooms, you know that making the collaborative part of the routine is not as easy as it sounds. And so you're building trust with each rep. Again, like I mentioned, one of the ways we decided to work together as we build toward these bigger projects is by collaborating, tag teaming on a series of regional live call-in specials. First, sort of centered around the election through America Amplified, and then shifting toward the impacts of coronavirus in our region. So that was a way that our stations could work together. And with every connection that you make with those stations, you're strengthening the partnership so that when you do propose that, big 10-part series, you have the goodwill, you're part of their ecosystem, and they can see it as manageable. Next slide. Yeah, so how do you get stuff done without being controlling? That's one of the, something I thought about when I first started this, because for some of you in collaborations, it might be in an MOU, certain expectations for the different stations. But one thing that I was really thinking about, and it tends to lead toward my own style of leadership, is that I'm really an advocate of bringing people along with you, getting that buy-in for ideas, because not only does that kind of generate the motivation and energy to move forward with these projects, but you really are getting the nuances from the different partner stations. One idea I may have in Hartford might reflect differently in, say, Maine or Vermont. And by getting that buy-in, you're also getting those nuances. Next slide. Oh, so yeah, this is a photo of me in action. I was meeting with a lot of the New England News Collaborative partners in February. And I thought it was fun to just show that photo because I think, next slide, the force of positivity helps to get stuff done. I mean, part of that is visual, sort of the body language, kind of paying attention when you're with your partners, or even if it's on Zoom, what's your body language? Are you slumping? Are you kind of more engaged? You're up and that, smiling. I think that's good, but I think it's also good to reinforce the message of why we're doing this and who we're trying to reach. We're not just putting all this work in to prove that our collaborative is functional. Really our mission is to serve the public. So just kind of reinforcing that from time to time, I think is really helpful. But also, it's really important to listen closely to your partner's needs as you chart the path forward. Some of your partners may have smaller shops and they might not think they have a lot to give, but at the same time, they want to have an impact. So because you've been listening to your partner's needs, you've also been listening to what their goals are. So I would advocate really jumping on those common goals that you have together. Every news organization wants to tell the innovative stories. It's a matter of how with the resources, and a collaboration is a way to do that. And by also amplifying their work and giving them a bigger audience, which a lot of these smaller organizations certainly want to do. And I would also add, a compliment never hurt. A big element of our regional collaboration is sharing stories, daily stories that helps shore up the other newsrooms every day. But it doesn't always happen. People are busy. They don't always share a story that is regionally relevant. So I have to remind them. But sometimes I could say, hey, I noticed that great story that such and such reporter did. It'd be great if you could share that excellent story. Stations will love to have it. But you were also able to give that compliment because you were paying attention. So with that, I'm just going to toss it now to Jeremy over at Guns in America.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Bernfeld. I'm the project director and the lead editor of Guns and America. We're a 2-year collaborative journalism project reporting on the role of guns in American life. And we are funded by a generous grant from the Candida Fund. So we're a bit of a different funding model from other public radio collaboratives. We're comprised of 10 public media stations with a national footprint from Connecticut, up where Vanessa is, to Oregon. And we say that we cover the various ways that guns affect our lives. So yes, we cover the latest mass shooting. We cover the role of guns in suicide. We cover the cultural role of hunting and sport shooting, especially in rural America. So a wide array of ways. And I'm based at WAMU, the public radio station in DC. These are our reporters. So each one of these 10 reporters is funded by our Guns in America grant, and they're each based at a different public media station in their local city. And our model is local, right? We're not parachuting in. We're in different kinds of communities so that we can cover the different kinds of issues. And so we can raise up local journalism. And I'd be remiss not to plug gunsandamerica.org. So you can check us out there. In terms of some of the takeaways I have is, look for ways to say yes, as Vanessa just mentioned, but also clearly communicate the boundaries, right? The point of collaboration is to be a rising tide that lifts all boats to accomplish together what you could not do on your own. And part of that is filling a need for your partners, which Donna will also talk about in a bit. But know that you can't fill every need. And that means saying no when you have to. Otherwise, you'll be running in as many directions as you have partners. I find that the best way to do this is through communication. So communicate the boundaries ahead of time, and then communicate when and why you're being flexible on those boundaries. Communicate when you can't be flexible. So an example from our Guns in America work, every one of our partner stations, remember these are public radio stations, they said, we want to air your radio stories in our local morning edition broadcast. So it's the same show originating out of DC and out of LA, and they want to put it in their local slot. But somehow every one of the 10 stations, and no joke, every one of them had different requirements for the lengths of the stories. So it's the same morning edition broadcast out of DC, everybody had a different hole size somehow. We can't, as Guns in America, as this collaborative project, we can't file different length stories for each station. We can't file 10 stories, 10 versions of the same story. We also can't allow our reporters to file stories that only their local station can use. The point is to have this national coverage and have this national footprint and expose our journalism to different audiences. So we had to listen to our partner stations, try to understand their concerns, try to make it work for them, but we also had to say no. We had to tell these stations that we can't fit exactly what you want. So we did find a common length between 4 minutes and 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Everyone could air it. That's a little bit of a tight window. So we went back to them, we said, okay, we've got that common ground, and now we're asking you to compromise. Can you find some ways to get us a few more seconds here and there? And now we found that between 3 minutes and 45 seconds and 4 minutes and 30 seconds, all 10 of our partner stations can air it. So we've committed that 99% of our radio stories will fit within that length so that if they should choose to, they can air it. And another thing I want to talk about is suggesting that you make a priority to build individual relationships with the actual people behind your partnership. So Vanessa talked about the power of positivity. The thing that I have to always remind myself on a daily basis is that I'm the only one who regularly interacts with all of the partners, right? I'm the hub of the hub and spoke. So while I know that there's a great story coming from Dallas, my partner in North Carolina, they're in the dark about my plans unless I'm the one who tells them. So it's crazy to tailor what you do to each individual person, but in some ways and sometimes you have to know when to do that. Sometimes it's worth an individual phone call or email just to build a relationship, just to check in. And at the same time, it's okay to require effort on the part of your partners, right? That's why it's called partnership. So for instance, we send out a day book so our partners know what to expect, what we're covering. And I tell the partners, if you want to know what's going on, if you want to know what stories you can expect, check that email. And that's requiring the effort on their part. But if there's something of particular value, I'll pull that out and I'll flag it separately, right? So say we produced a story from Idaho that I think will really resonate in Colorado. I might talk to our partner in Colorado and say, you might want to look really closely at this story. I think it could really benefit your audience. And hopefully that results in a happy partner in Colorado, a happy partner in Idaho, and in our work getting in front of more people. We hope our work has impact. So why is this relationship building important? I mean, it's obvious. Things will go wrong, and you'll need the trust and goodwill that these individual relationships, you'll need that when things go wrong. And finally, pre-pandemic version, one way to build individual relationships is to visit in person. I mean, it's so easy. We're having a whole conference on Zoom. We've never been more connected, but doing those individual in-person relationships are huge. I'm still reaping benefits from trips I took years ago. And the person I learned that from is Donna Vestal. So with that, Donna, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. It just makes me so happy to listen to both Jeremy and Vanessa and know that public media is really in good hands for the future. As I mentioned before, my new baby is America Amplified, which is a collaboration that actually has its roots in some of the dissatisfaction after the 2016 election. News directors across the country, I'm talking primarily about public radio news directors across the country, pointed to what they felt were their own failings in understanding what was happening across America. And so, you know, they started a conversation with CPB about how to fix that narrative. How do we have this amazing network across the country, and maybe we're not sharing those voices appropriately. So, so all of this talk eventually led to CPB agreeing to fund a grant called Election 2020 Listening to America. It was awarded to KCUR in Kansas City to navigate this and bring this together. And basically, we were asked to create a 7-person member team and then to work with collaborative networks across the country. So, why did we do that? The whole premise was built on the successful collaborations already in public media, and that we needed to build on that fiber that we had already invested in. Slide. And so this actually was from the first group meeting we had back in January, a whole different world then. The central team, the 7-person team, is here with many of the editors from across the country, one on Zoom at the time, even someone from the BBC was there. And that was when we really hammered out what our plan would be for the year, working with the collaborations. And I want to emphasize that our feeling was we wanted to learn from the editors in place at those collaborations. We don't dictate what they want to do in their part of the country or what their collaboration needs and wants and what's the next ambition or aspiration, but we've worked through what they have set out as the best course of action for this year. And if I can read the mission statement briefly, because one part of it is really crucial, or all of it is, but this one part in this setting. The America Amplified initiative will empower public media to create innovative journalism by listening to communities and elevating diverse voices. The effort will strengthen collaboration within public media, build trust in local journalism, and deepen understanding of America's needs and aspirations. Slide.
Donna, let's pause there for now
Yeah.
on the slides. We want to get to questions. We're short on time for that.
Do you want me to go to my problems? I can skip
yeah,
all of that.
Actually, let's go to that, because part of Teresa's question to us earlier was they really wanted to hear about any failures that you've had and how you learned from them.
Jeremy, could you just skip over? I won't explain about America Amplified in those collaborations. I can just go right to solve your partner's problems. And then I'll do this very quickly, okay? A couple big things that I've learned have been basically in a collaboration like this, there are going to be problems no matter what. You have to solve the problems. Look for problems as opportunities in every instance you can, because they are telling you what your partner needs or what you need from that. Whatever is identified as a problem, you have to almost attack it, right? You cannot get defensive or apportion blame or even want to say, hey, you signed the dotted line and here are the rules. That doesn't work. You have to listen first. And then make sure that anything you say you will do, you do without fail. Never, ever. If you're in the lead in a collaboration, you only get, you lose trust, you lose trust. And finally, I would advocate that whatever you do, don't create problems. If you do have to create a problem connected to one collaboration or one partner to another, make sure you have the solution already in your back pocket. Slide. Last slide. And I feel this very profoundly, and that is that it's really important that we embrace our frustrations when we do this work, because this is not easy, and easy is not the goal. If easy were the goal, we would all be in our little glass houses and do this journalism in a very directive way, reporter, editor, the way we're all most comfortable with. We can't control our partners either. We can't run their business. We can be upset by those decisions they make, but we have to, again, learn from that and realize that it's a learning opportunity for us to strategize around, because every obstacle is there for a reason. You just have to understand what is revealed. This happened just the other day with one of our partners in terms of not wanting to deal with us asking for more information because they were overwhelmed in that moment. So it was frustrating not to get the answers what we needed, but we understood we had to come back and find another way to work with them. And finally, always, like Vanessa says, model the positive, model the approach that you hope to get back in return. You know, it doesn't matter if that's not what you get back, but model it in every way you possibly can. And with that, I'll hand it back to you. Although I think Kathy might have a few lessons of her own that she's seen from collaboratives.
Well, one thing, I actually want to direct this first question to Kathy, and Kathy, this might help get to your answer as well, but not in today's questions, but over the course of the last day. People have a lot of questions about measuring the impact of these collaborations. As someone who looks at these grant applications and then judges the results of the impact of these, can you talk about what's meaningful and what people should be thinking about as they start up collaborations?
Sure. You know, just a couple of thoughts leading into that, Judon. One is that collaboration is really hard. You know, it's so easy to talk about collaboration and it all sounds great and we're all going to be friends along the way. And that's just not how it works. It takes a lot of work. And I think it really has to start with a shared vision of what it is you want to achieve. Because once you have that shared vision, then your collaboration can start putting down the markers of what are your goals? What are the metrics against those goals? And, you know, each one is probably going to be a little bit different, but I think that's really essential. And, you know, what we've looked at in the CPB grants, which, you know, in some ways, I think it's hard in a grant process to really capture everything that happens, you know, in these collaborations. But we've looked at audience. Have you expanded the audience in some way? You know, have you included engagement? That's something that, you know, Donna, for example, is working on a lot, and also Vanessa through America Amplified. You know, are you looking at different communities outside of the sort of typical audience that your station or your collaboration might have? I mean, we've done literal kind of story counts because, you know, again, hard to wrap your arms around everything that a collaboration can achieve. I mean, we do look at things like, do they win awards? Are there things that are happening that might not have happened otherwise? We look internally, are the partners able to get along and actually make things happen so that we're not getting reports back that, you know, there's tension or, you know, there are big obstacles to collaboration. And, you know, for us, because we are funders at CPB and we see our funding as a way to get things going, we also look at sustainability. You know, at what point can the stations really take this work up on their own so that they're not coming back to us for funding saying, yeah, you know, this is all great, it's all working fine, but we can't figure out how to sustain it. That's really a huge metric. And to me, that's what separates collaboration as a way of doing business from collaboration as a project, where everybody says, yeah, we did that, it was great, now we're going to go back to what we were doing before. And that's not what we're trying to achieve at CPB. It's really about collaboration as a way of doing business. And when I look at, you know, Vanessa and Jeremy and Donna and so many of these collaborations, they've really figured that out. And it generally is not, you find a big sponsor or you find another big grant, but you incorporate the ongoing cost of the collaboration into your own operating budget because it's so essential to what you do. So that's kind of a key marker for us as we look across these collaborations.
That's a great answer, Kathy, and very insightful. We have one question that talks about sort of including equity in our collaborations. You know, a lot of what we talk about in public media is about building trust, better serving our communities. But then people refer just back to our own slides where they look at the pictures and they see not a lot of people of color represented in those collaborations. So what are you all doing to ensure that the voices of the very people that you're trying to serve with some of these collaborations are represented not only as feedback, but in the planning process? Anybody want to jump in and take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge in public media specifically too, because we lack a lot of diversity in many places and certainly in leadership roles. And I think we consider it one of the, for America Amplified, I see that in the picture that we show, which is basically a leadership team that doesn't necessarily represent the places that the people in the communities of America. And so what we've done is we have an advisory board that is quite diverse, and they're informing what we do at all times. And we're also making sure that we're elevating the work of diverse journalists, the reporters, the people on the ground, the people who are making those connections in those communities and giving them the support that they need. We've been frustrated on one aspect, like we heard from a lot of stations that they wanted Spanish language translation, right? So we're providing that. But that's not the answer there, right? I mean, that Spanish, we're looking and trying to encourage our partners to figure out on the ground, how do you really connect with those communities through, not just through language, but in what they need and what they're looking for. We don't necessarily, because of the obstacle that public media faces and media in general, but public media I think sometimes struggles with is really understanding those communities. And I think when Kathy talks about community engagement, that's a lot of the reason why engagement is so critical to public media, but that is more in the very earliest stages of us figuring that out. And there are many, I mean, I think Vanessa, you've been part of something that is certainly taking this on head on, and a collaboration that you might want to talk about, and even what you're seeing.
Sure. So previous to my leadership role with the New England News Collaborative, I was part of Sharing America, which was a 4-station public radio collaboration supported by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and involved KCUR, where Donna was the head there. And the main impetus for that was to bring not only diverse reporters into public media, but as a way of bringing more diverse voices in our communities to light, to radio, to digital. And so that was very targeted for that reason. But not only that, I mean, it's one thing to bring people on board, but it's another thing to support them. So through that process, there was training, built into the budget. So I came in as a newspaper reporter, not knowing anything about public media, really. Honestly, I did not grow up listening to NPR. I grew up in an isolated area of California in the desert, where growing up, we didn't get an NPR signal. We just didn't have it. So I didn't know about NPR really until I was well into my adulthood. And I'm just being completely honest with you. So as I went from a skilled newspaper reporter to the public media world, I had to learn how to be a radio reporter. I had to learn about certain voicing. But one thing that stuck out to me as I was learning these new skills through this collaboration was, we want you to sound like yourself, Vanessa. We don't want you to sound like someone you might imagine is a public radio announcer or reporter. We want you to be yourself. We want to hear Vanessa. So I think that really stuck with me. But it's an ongoing process. Like Donna said, we have to acknowledge the problem first, and we are not reaching enough younger, diverse members of our community. And that's something that we are going to be intentional about.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. Jeremy, I'll ask you about this. A lot of people in the group want to know about collaborating outside of public media. Has WAMU or this project had that experience? And can you talk more about that?
So for my project specifically, that is a goal of ours, and one I can say honestly that we haven't had a ton of success with. So far, we've done some of that relationship building that Vanessa referred to in the session here. That we've had republishing relationships with local news partners in many of our communities. So local newspapers, a few local blogs have picked up our work. We have a partnership where Univision republishes in Spanish many of our stories. So those are things, I guess I would say, like baby steps and trying to build those connections and that trust that could flower into something that's more of a actual collaboration as opposed to just republishing. But that's where we are for now.
Kathy, can you add to that? You're muted.
Let me unmute myself here. Absolutely. I think this is increasingly important. And, you know, we had to, within public media, I think first build our muscles, you know, that Vanessa was talking about earlier around collaboration, because we just didn't have them. And now I think there's much more of a kind of norm of collaborating among public media stations. And to me, the next phase is now collaborating more with entities outside of public media. And Donna, look at someone like you with the Charlotte Collaborative, where you've got all these different organizations in Charlotte that WFAE is working with. And I think that's really tremendous, because as we focus on local news ecosystems and how do we reinvent those, right? Because with newspapers kind of diminishing in their influence in many communities, that doesn't mean that local news is any less important or the need for it is diminishing in any way. So public media needs to step into that role in our communities, and I hope be a leader in working with other organizations, you know, digital startups, ethnic newspapers, libraries, all kinds of community organizations, so that we can be serving the information needs of our communities. And we do have some collaborations now that are working with outside public media entities. The California collaboration works with Cal Matters. Ohio Valley Resource works with the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting. Part of our challenge at CPB is just our funding model, because we can only fund public media organizations. So we couldn't go directly to a digital startup and say, we're going to give you funding, because it's not within our legislation and our purview to be able to do that. But we can work with public media organizations who in turn are working with other organizations outside public media. So I think that's really one of the next steps that we all need to be thinking about as we focus on how we really reinvent the local news ecosystem.
And I'll just add to that. Kathy mentioned some of the collaborations that my station is involved in. So we haven't received any of the large public media grants for collaborations. And so we've really just kind of started this with the resources at our disposal, sharing content. Most recently, we were awarded the $100,000 Facebook grant to do a collaboration with a publication targeting African-American residents, another targeting business, small businesses, and then a third targeting Spanish language. And so we're going to use that grant to build a collaboration with our local partners here who are not public media and who are actual all commercial entities to do that kind of work. So there's another question in here about evolving collaborations beyond the funding. How do you keep these things going? And Kathy, you spoke a little bit to this, but can somebody here speak to some practical ways in which collaborations you've been involved with have continued after?
That might be a Donna Vestal.
Yeah, I was going to ask Donna.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked into a news leader's office, and he told me, yeah, you've got a grant, but I know I only have to give you this much, and that's what we'll do, and we'll serve the needs of this grant, and we'll be done. And I heard so much in that answer, and I just had to dig and dig and dig into it until I realized what he needed. He needed a solution in regarding certainly fulfilling his newscast needs, but so much deeper in terms of he didn't trust yet, right? So I set out to make sure that we would be as valuable as possible to the things that he needed, so there was no way that they could imagine doing their work without Harvest Public Media at the time. And that was pretty much the direction I took. And a lot of times I remember Jeremy succeeded me, by the way, as editor of Harvest. And I remember him not at the early stages thinking I was just bending over backwards sometimes and turning myself into knots at that early stage. In terms of making it work for those partners, making sure we delivered the exact thing they needed, even though we could have made them stick to the letter of the law. But the key was truly understanding and making it valuable enough, as Kathy said, that they can't imagine meeting the needs and serving their audience without you, that it would be at a cost to them without you. And that's a tall order until you prove the case, and you are valuable over and over again, and you don't let them down, and they can count on you to solve problems and be a partner with them in serving their audiences, not inserting yourself into the way they need to operate, but giving them the freedom by what you provide to let them operate the way that they need to in their estimation in serving their audience and serving their own ambitions. So the operating, it's just absolutely key. I mean, it's hard not to think with some smaller stations, certainly, that there's just no other way unless there's funding, right? Outside funding. But at the same time, you can convince them, and it can become pretty clear that the best use of even that one reporter might be to have that one reporter associated with a larger team. I also have seen a benefit in not having a money exchange necessarily within some of these collaborations. A lot of collaborative efforts in public media, the people who the station that has the editor really wants the other stations to pay for that editor, and I think that's very short-sighted, because I think the station that has the editor gets so much from that role and the contributions that person makes, that asking for money when it just complicates the relationship and makes it easy to find another solution there. So that's a very, practical kind of thing that a lot of people might disagree with me about, but that's my feeling on that.
And I would just really quickly add, if you're grant funded, the thing I always tell our grantees is don't wait until the last day of the grant to start thinking about what happens next. Start on the first day of the grant, thinking about where the next funding is coming from.
That's a really good point. And a lot of times we try to build that into our applications because we know we need to think about that first before we receive that first dollar. So very good point to make. Jeremy, can you add your perspective on sustaining collaborations after the initial funding?
I think the one thing I would add is that, I see that there's a fairly easy business case to be made for many collaborations, right? The case that I make to my partners is essentially, you pay for one reporter, but you get the work of 10. You get the work of a team that has been steeped in these issues that you yourself have identified as important to your community. We're steeped in these every day. We've been working on it for 2 years. We have specific, knowledge that can help make not just your reporters' coverage better, but your whole newsroom's coverage better. So I think when you can make that business case, whether that's to the content folks at your station, as kind of Donna was saying, or whether it's to the more business side folks of the people at partner stations in our case, or other partner journalism organizations, you know, I think there is a solid case to be made when you do it effectively.
So we have a comment here about the media institutions viewing themselves as inherently white serving, and sort of the leadership development and training needed to improve our institutions. One, I want to make a comment about that, and then I want to turn to Vanessa. You know, one of the things that I think of for my institution as somebody who is deeply committed to making sure that we serve all segments of our community, that we amplify voices that aren't traditionally heard in our spaces, is, you know, I don't want that to be about me and my personal mission. You know, my job is only completed when I change the culture of the institution so that we value that at every level. And that's hard work. And that's a lot of repeated, you know, raising those questions in every meeting and making sure that not just me, but that multiple people on my team embrace that. So we send people out to trainings. We bring in members of the community to talk directly to our journalists outside of projects, right? We have an ongoing monthly where we try to bring somebody in to just share their perspective on the community. And we particularly look for people who are serving or involved with communities of color. Vanessa, can you talk about this from your perspective and share any insights there?
Sure. I mean, I think what you bring up, Donna, is very important. You know, I took a leadership training before I became the editor of the New England News Collaborative. While I was still a reporter with Sharing America, I did that through the News Editors Association, and it was held before the last NABJ conference last August in Florida. I thought that was super helpful. So I think a major point for this is to sort of develop those leaders before they're in the leadership roles, and to kind of give them that confidence and that boost so that they do feel confident to apply for these leadership positions, even if they might not be there, because as you pointed out, a lot of leaders in public media, you will notice, are not people of color. So, you know, I think continuing those leadership programs, but even now in this position, I would love more leadership training just to keep boosting my skills and making sure I'm as effective as I can be for my partners. But I certainly think not only the training for reporters, you know, from a reporting standpoint and being on public air, but training people to be leaders in the field.
Thank you for that. So I want to be respectful of time. We're almost at the networking hour. We did have a request that if any of you can send additional best practices, learnings that would help people as they start to think about their collaborations, that would be appreciated. So we'll provide the slide deck to attendees, but anything in addition to that, please send it to the organizers of the conference so that they can make that available to folks as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for a great conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the people who were in attendance learned a lot too. Thank you all.